Hello and welcome to the Max Revenue Show. I'm your host, Trey Shields, and I'm here with another Friends with Benefits episode with Mr. Luke Berry, the Million Dollar Man. Luke, how are you today?
Doing well, bud. How are you?
Good. How do we feel about the Million Dollar Man moniker?
That's totally up to you.
Out of all the videos we put up, yours on writing $1 million in 2025 is performing almost like better than everything we have. So we figure we keep you
Whenever I
around.
think of $1 Million Man, I think of Matthew McConaughey and that one movie with Al Pacino
I don't know that one.
for the yeah, it's a good movie. I forgot the name of it, but he loses it all. So I don't know. It is what it is.
10-4. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
For the love of the money, I think is what the movie is.
Gotcha. Today's episode is titled 5 Biggest Mistakes EB Producers Make and What to Do Instead. But before we get into that, shout out to today's sponsor, Insurance Xdate. Can't say enough good things about them. They have EB data, they have PNC data. If you're a producer and you're in the trenches and you're trying to find leads and you want to win more new business, Insurance Xdate is your huckleberry. I have a link to a free trial in the show notes. So if you are struggling with lead lists or who to call or when to call, because it gives you the data on when they renew or how many lives or whatever, they've got it. So go check it out. Link in the show notes to a free trial. Now, back to the big mistakes. Luke, what is the biggest mistake you see EB producers make?
Yeah, and when you had asked me to put this together, Trey, I could put this list down to 5. You can make it 20. You can make it 30. But really what I'm seeing in 2026, the 5 biggest mistakes employee benefit producers can make, really the first one that I'll start off with out of the 5 is they think, or a newer producer thinks, that getting the meeting is the goal. In reality, you guys just lack a system afterward. So the meeting's really not just the goal, right? You need to have a system. We've said it before, Trey. You're going to fall to the level of your systems. If you want to set a goal to run a marathon, well, you're going to run the marathon just one time, right? If you set a goal to win a deal, you're going to get that deal one time. A system is going to allow you to get multiple deals at multiple times and learning how to scale that. And so what I mean by that is you got to learn to sell the sizzle, not the steak. In so many of the first meetings and so many of the first calls, I see newer producers trying to sell the steak. Everyone can produce savings. In reality, how do you know that that's even the problem they might have, right? They might be a private equity backed firm where cash it really isn't an issue, right? They want to provide better benefits. It could be the exact inverse. Really, what do you know and how do you know their problem? And better put, how do you do enough research on the beginning to where you can articulate the problem before they even know that that's even a problem themselves, right? So if they're fully insured, right, just as an example, they have zero predictability. You can easily see that by pulling 5,500 filing forms, right? You get the signer, you get their cell phone number, you can cross correlate that to multiple different databases, right? So you already know their problem before they even know it, right? So start to list out all those issues. Sell the sizzle, not the steak. If they're self-funded, it could be vendor accountability, right? If you're smart enough to actually do your full due diligence, you'll be able to know their vendor stack before even having that phone call, not to attack, right, to address or anything, but just to open up the atmosphere for a positive conversation on, are you holding your vendors accountable? Are you holding this specific vendor accountable? I've seen this vendor in other areas of dealings that we've had, and they're not the best. How do you step up that game to again bring the best in class vendors to that solution? So again, really the first, just to reiterate, the first mistake that I see is you just think too small. Setting the meeting is not the ultimate goal. Building a system to get multiple meetings, to get multiple deals is the ultimate goal at hand. So that's really the first.
Okay, what you got for number 2?
Number 2, this might be a little controversial. I see way too many producers partnering with the wrong producer in the office. Right, you're a newbie. I said this on my very first podcast. You're walking in, it's your very first big boy office or big boy job. It might be your second, job in the industry, or maybe not in the industry, but in general, you're walking into a culture you're not really aware of. And so you might have the guy that you might think what he's projecting is that he's the best of the best. in reality, he might be B player or C player. Just because a guy's been around 20 to 25 years, maybe even 15 years, doesn't mean he's that great at his job, right? If you got a guy that's got $1 million book, he's been in the game 25 years, take $1 million and divide it by 25. It's not a whole lot of production. So that doesn't mean that necessarily that you need to partner with that producer. So instead of just going out and looking at that, you need to take a step back. And I'm not saying have a jaded approach, but you have way too many senior guys out there that are just looking for your contacts, your centers of influence, and they're really just preying upon your innocence for advantage. Right? It's a tale as old as time. We've seen it. What you want to do is find mentors who are there to truly give and to give back, and to make sure both parties are adding value to the relationship, not just benefiting from one another. Yeah, I've talked about Jack in my office and Ross. We have a mutual benefit added relationship to where I know that those two guys are going to come in with abilities to add to my deficit to where I'm not good or capable that week to step in. So, for example, I had the flu last week. I know Ross was able to jump in on meetings to where I'm not 100%. He could step in, and same thing with Jack as he's learning. And so there's a mutual benefit for us partnering together. It's not just, hey, I'm going to scratch your back, you scratch mine. Or the best one is I've seen, hey, junior producer, I'm going to put you on 1 or 2 deals. But oh, by the way, now I own you and you're going to give me the next 10 deals that are in your pipeline. That's just not
Mhm.
fair
What is the best revenue split you've seen? You don't have to share yours specifically, but what's kind of the best arrangement you've seen with
amongst
senior and
producers.
young? Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, then this is what I'm going to get back on part five or point five. I'm big on 50-50. If that person is truly all in on the process, like Jack is, Jack came in brand new. Should I have given him 50-50? Probably not. Was it the right thing to do based on his work ethic and his involvement? Yeah. Right. Because it's an investment, right? It's an investment in my time. It's an investment in him. And that's yielded dividends. So I would say, a lot of folks, you could overcomplicate this, right? A lot of folks I would say that I see it's a 70-20 split until they see that junior producer really earn um, the right to be there, to have the seat at the table, and then they start to give that producer a more of an equal split as they grow and mature.
If I'm a new producer and I'm going into an office, I don't know insurance. I don't know anything about carriers or this, that, and the other. Or Arissa, is that a girl I dated in college? I have no idea. Like, what am I looking for? Like, what would you tell somebody to be looking for? What are some red flags? And I know you kind of touched on this with a 1 million over 25 years, but what would you look for and what would you stay away from?
So one thing I would do that I wish I would have mentioned in the podcast previously, one thing my grandfather instilled in me is do it the company's way 6 months, right? Go in and do it their way for a full 6 months and then start to adapt. Start bucking some things. Start really learning and growing. It'll show humility that you don't know everything. And by the way, if you're between the ages of 21 to 28, your brain is still maturing and growing. You don't know everything. Um, Not saying that I do at 33, but I know a lot more now than I did at 28. And so by doing it their way, you're able to really learn, right, and to soak in a couple of things about the culture in the office. The second part of that is you're going to really see who the players are and who the pretend players are. And so the second aspect or the advice that I would give to that is once you have done it their way for 6 months, sit in as many meetings as possible with as many producers as you're allowed to and just watch and learn. Stylistically, find somebody that you can actually accommodate and help maybe with their just their conversations. We've talked about this all the time is if you've got, especially in the EB world, you've got the CFO, right? You've got the head of HR, you've got the CEO, you've got the HR assistant, the HR journalist, the controller. One guy is not going to be able to manage all those different personalities. So how can you be the guy to help step in and help that senior producer manage the other personalities, right? You're not going to know that until you start to listen and you start to not use this so much.
How can a younger producer bring value to a senior producer?
Great question. Help prepare for the meetings. Always ask, hey, what can I be doing? Don't just show up for the meeting. The best outcome for any kind of meeting is the opportunity to prepare And so the more time you spend preparing, right, you're going to have a better outcome for that meeting. So if you can help that senior producer prepare to prep, to look at who's going to be in attendance in the meeting, ask where you could be a service, it's going to be huge. And then priorly for me, sorry, I'm still getting over the flu. Um, Time. I don't have as much time as I did when I first started. And so one thing I lean on Jack for is reaching out to prospects. So what he'll routinely come in and do for me is say, hey, who do I need to be calling this week? Right. So I'll do the legwork. We'll look through who we need to call, who we need to be, focusing on, whether it's a current client or prospective client. And I'll be able to give him that to be able to check in. And so he's building a relationship with that prospect or suspect or client, but also he's also learning the process and the systems, going back to step one, the systems in which I've made a book of, and that now he can double down on.
Would you say this is fair to say if you can open doors, you'll have no shortage of mentors and people willing to tutor you or bring you under their tutelage?
100%. But with that said, you got to be very careful of who you ask to mentor, to be your
That's fair.
mentor.
Uh,
Because mentors are a dime a dozen. I will say this: everyone has their own self interest at heart. They do. It's very rare that you're going to find someone that cares enough about you to put their own self interest aside to see you grow over a 4-year period or 5-year period, outside of maybe your dad or mom.
I don't remember who said it, but it was literally what, like almost verbatim what you just said. Human behavior becomes very predictable when you realize everybody is always acting in their own best interest. All right, number 3, what you got?
Number three, their time frames. Again, for junior producers, the time frames to close deals are way too short. They really are. So instead of approaching four deals in a 6-month sales cycle, you really need to be thinking like, how do I approach 55 deals or 50 deals over a 2-year horizon, right? Learn to walk away from opportunities that drain and distract you from the deals that actually matter. So just to repeat myself, you got to learn to walk away from the opportunities that are going to drain and distract you from the deals that are within your reach. So instead of just focusing on 4 deals, I've seen so many producers not hit their validation marker because they think they've got a bird in hand, and when in reality, they don't have enough in the pipeline, right? They're going through and they're like, we're just 2 weeks away from finding out about this deal. We're going to get the phone call. We're going to get the phone call. Well, the phone call never comes, right? And so it's not just about activity. It's about, you did a great job lining those 4. How do you get 50 of them? Because out of the 50, I can guarantee you one of those will close and you're going to be a better producer for it. And the second aspect of that is prospects work with who they want to work with, right? You don't control the timing. You're not God, right? That E plus R equals O motto that we talk about, right? You can only control the value that you provide daily. So when you want to provide more value than their current broker, that's when you're going to get the BOR. So again, just not to hit repeat on this, but when you learn to provide more value than their current broker, you will then get the BOR. That might take 6 months. It might take 2 years. But if you have enough interactions with folks where you're continually adding authentic value to their life with proactive information, that's when those broker of record letters are going to start to flow.
What do you and your team do to do that, to provide more value? So for instance, in the last podcast, you talked about you were knocking on the door, knocking on the door, knocking on the door, and it took you 2 years to get in. You finally got in. What does that cadence look like for you guys? And
Don't
like
make
what are you doing?
don't make it about you. I had an old mentor that recently passed a few years ago, but we were at lunch and he was just old school, right? He took a spoon and he looked at the spoon and he said, "What do you see in the spoon?" And it was just the inside of the spoon. And I said, "Well, I see me upside down." He said, "It's right." He flipped the spoon around to where it was just facing outside, right outside towards me. He says, "What do you see now?" And I say, "It's me right side up." He said, "That's the key to life, Luke. If you can make everything else about everyone else, everything else about everything else about other
Everything
people,
about everyone else? Yeah.
yeah, you are going to have a correctly lived life." And I think that echoes into business so much. Like, right, if I'm adding value to prospects and not treating them as a prospect or a suspect, but just that this is a normal human, they have wants, desires, goals, and objectives just like I do. how do I find out those goals and objectives and likes and desires? And if I'm able to deliver on that with news and content or videos or connections, right, that I'm just trying to help them with, then eventually I'm going to win friends and influence people. And ultimately, that's the perfect motto. You can create a system around that that looks 100 different ways, right? At the end of the day, if you follow that principle of focusing on others rather than yourself, and it's hard, it's a muscle, like you've got to practice it, you're going to win the day.
So let's get real world specific. When's the prospect that you've been working on? What was their problem, and then how did you go about identifying and then sending them something of value? Like, give me an actual case study.
Yeah, I mean, it could be Trey. It's such a broad question. It could be something you saw on LinkedIn where they like to post about they're having, I might be on on the EB side, but I know that they had a bad property and casualty claim, right? Well, I'm going to take that into account, and I'm going to see, okay, like, look, let's go through and find a resource that we could send them that they might be able to talk with. That might be a current client of mine or not, but they could talk with about they went through the exact same thing. It could be that they just posted about a new CEO, right? Change management is hard. Pulling a Harvard Business Review article on change management and saying, "Hey, I just saw you got a new CEO. Congratulations! Just read this article. Thought you might find it of interest. Would love to talk soon." One thing that I have found is to not just post everything on LinkedIn. I actually would print those articles off, right? And I'll take a little sticky note, right? They're really cheap. Take a little sticky note and just write a letter on the sticky note, put it on the paper copy of that article, and say, "Hey, I thought you might find this of interest. Luke, you get to call him in the next 2 weeks. Hey, Trey, did you get the article that I sent you? Hope you found it of interest." Never ask for anything from them at all.
That's awesome.
It could be a book that you could send them. It could be it could be an HR, right? And you know that there's an issue with what's going on because you saw an article in Sherm. You might want to buy a couple of those books, write a letter in the book, and send it to them. They may never read it, but they're always going to remember that you try to add value to their life instead of taking it.
That's great. Hey, you mentioned something about like getting better at qualifying prospects. Any pointers you can say on, how to know if somebody's wasting your time or not, or if it's a real opportunity, or any things off the top of your head you can say on that?
Yeah, I would say for the junior producer, really lean in heavy to that senior producer that you're going to partner with. I wouldn't advise going at it alone unless you just want to learn people the hard way. A good senior producer can really talk to you about why this is a bad idea or why this is a bad lead because this person's short sighted. Um, for the more of the not so junior producers, I think qualifying based on personality is huge. Um, again, you guys have heard my story now. I think the money is a byproduct. The outcome is a byproduct of the process. If you follow the process correctly and focus on the process alone, the outcomes are going to take care of themselves. Part of that process is knowing who I'm doing business with, and do they know who they're doing business with on my end. And so I like to get who I am out early and out front. My story, what my beliefs are, my philosophy on the market, and what I have found is if I get that out there, they're going to agree with me or not agree with me. And if they agree with me, then I have the opportunity to start asking them questions about their business. Right? So many people start off sales calls or the first meeting with, "Tell me about your business." Do you even have the authority or the right socially at that point in time to even ask them about their business? Right? You have to build a bridge in order for that person to even feel comfortable talking to you about their biggest struggles in their business. For those that open up quickly about that without that bridge being built, those are the kind of prospects that concern me the most. They're just spewing their story out to anybody and everybody.
Wow, I've never thought about that. It's very interesting. Okay, so number one, just to recap, they think that getting the meeting is the goal. That could really be junior or senior producers. That's kind of broad. They partner with the wrong producer in the office. That's more for junior. Three, their time frames to close deals are too short. I'd say primarily more for a noob. Number four, I found super interesting. I mean, this is everybody, new producer, senior producer. Yeah, like I think this is for everybody.
Yeah. So number 4 is you guys don't prioritize. I say you guys, me, myself included,
Yeah,
right? We don't prioritize our mental health or physical health. I would say from a female producer standpoint, I don't know, man. I'd say I see a lot of female producers in real estate, in the insurance marketplace, and alike. They're dominant, right? They're out there working out. They got their mental health in check, and they're on it. The guys though struggle the most from what I'm seeing. And for those that want to call me out. But as a guy, I tell you, until I started making this a priority, uh, I was just a lump on a wall or a log. I wasn't really just. I was not being as good of a father, as good of a husband, as good of a producer, as good of a coworker as I could have been. And not that it's always about performance, but through the performance of working out, what I realized is I'm human, right? Am I allowing my body to recover from work? So instead of talking about working out and recovery, when's the last time I let my body recover from work? When did I let myself Sabbath? What is my prayer life look like? Or your meditation? For me, it's my prayer life. What does that look like? What do my
Sure.
workout look like? What do my eating rhythms look like? Like we're meant to feast. We're also meant to fast. Those are true things that have been, again, from my faith standpoint, alive and well and true for the last 2,000 plus years, right? What do those rhythms look like? So instead of setting goals, what are the systems around my life that I could scale my humanity around, right? And part of it's not being on with work 24/7, 365. Like I gotta recover from work. Uh, there's an author that I cannot remember his name. It's an early, great author. He wrote Habits of the Household. My family's a big fan of it. He also wrote Fuel for the Body and Soul. I can send a link. I'm getting the name wrong again, recovering from flu brain. But what he talks about is these systems with your body to recover, like taking the Sabbath, reapplying the time with friends, being intentional, not being on your phone all the time. Those are huge aspects of just again getting back to it. But what he made a really big point of, which I thought was fascinating, he said for the Sabbath, for your rest, for your recovery, those that work with their hands all day need to probably do something with their brains for recovery. But those that work with their brains all day need to do something with their hands for their recovery and their Sabbath. So just an interesting take. So for those that are brokers that are on the phone, that are dialing, that are smiling, that are on spreadsheets all day long, it might be that you need to go for a run. You might want to do some woodcrafting, but doing something outside with your hands, I think has been huge for me, and I think it's very applicable for other producers in the.
That is really cool. I really relate to that a lot. Most of my days spent behind a computer, and so for me, that Sabbath or the reset, whatever you want to call it, it's lifting weights and running, right? And that's really cool. One thing I was gonna interesting note. Um, so I was a college athlete, and I was talking with one of my old teammates, and they were just talking about like schemes and these guys that are just throwing so much harder. They're so much bigger. They're so much stronger. They're so much better than we were like 20 years ago. And he was just like, man, like I just don't understand how they're doing that. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, dude, the way that they like recovery, their sleep, what they eat, man, they just fed us slop, dude. They fed us slop. There was no talk of recovery. You might go to like the PT table and they might wrap your ankle or whatever, but like the amount of effort and thought and intentionality and systematizing, whatever you want to call it, that goes into their rest, their recovery, how they feed themselves, their workouts, everything is dialed. And so you look at that over the course of time because it compounds over time, and like then you just get an infinitely better product.
Yeah,
So, I think in the business world, or at least for me personally, a lot of times that goes by the wayside, but the mental and physical health thing I've found is not a subtraction. It's not like I go to the gym and it takes away from me. It actually gives me more, which I think we talked about in the last podcast. I can now be ready to do second shift with the family.
yeah, absolutely. And I would say this too, Dr. Peter Attia, he's a great MD. I would encourage all of our followers to follow him. But he talked about how people in business need to train like they're professional athletes. Well, how do professional athletes train? just like you said, Trey. It's sleep, it's eating, it's all these patterns and behaviors, because at the end of the day, you're going to stack days. You want to stack days in a negative aspect where you're taking days away from your life? Or do you want to stack days that are adding days to longevity of your life? And for me, you know, I'd rather have the longevity and to be healthy.
I read a book a while ago, Stephen Pressfield, the War of Art, which is it's like a classic. But I actually think the one he had after that called Turning Pro was even better, and that's what he talks about is like, what does it mean to be a professional? Like you talk about turning pro, and I know I sure didn't. I kicked it around the minor leagues for a little bit, and I never became a pro. You know, it's like I did the minimum. It wasn't like I took it super serious. I kind of like just checked boxes, but it's like then there were guys around me that like they were true professionals, and when you like it, almost you have to see a true professional to realize what it actually is. You know, and you're like, oh, that guy's playing a way different game from me. Well, guess who made it to the big leagues? Either the guys that were insanely talented or the guys who actually were true professionals. You know, and I need to do a better job of that in my 9 to 5. You know, like if I'm going to do this podcast, what do I have to do? Like I need to study interviewing. I need to study content. I need to study the people that came before it. What does that look like? How do you become a true professional? I should invest in my health, invest in my sleep, in my recovery. And so there's levels to the game, and I think the mental and physical side is one that we overlook a lot. So I think that's number 4 was great. Number 5, what you have for the last one?
Yeah. And I mean, simply put, what I'm seeing is junior producers aren't pouring back into others. And I know that might sound counterintuitive, but just hear me out. So no
Junior
matter
producers or senior producers?
junior producers,
Okay.
so just hear me out on this. So we call it our downline. So in a downline, you got to have an upline and a downline. So no matter where you're at in your career, right, you know more than the guy that just started. You don't have to be a know-it-all. Again, just hear me out on this. But if you practice, right, the strategy of giving back and the ability to give back to others and to add value to the folks you're in the day-to-day office with, the trenches with, the new guy that just started, of asking him how you can help add value to his life and his journey, those will stack in a way that in 15 years, you're going to look back and go, holy cow, not only do I love what I do, but I also have a flock of folks that know, like, and trust me because they know that I valued them first. And so, again, for those newer guys, I would find a guy that's above you, that's going to mentor you, and it's going to pour into you. And then I would find a guy below you that you can pour into and you could also mentor as well. And again, mentoring doesn't need to be some formal thing of, hey, I'm going to take you underneath my wing and we're going to figure this thing out together. You'll lose friends really quickly by doing that. What I mean by is just like going to ask the senior producer, hey, I know you got this meeting coming up. How can I help you prep for it? Ask the junior producer, the younger producer below you, hey, man, what meetings you got? If I can be of any value, let me know. How can I help? Right.
Mm.
That's what you're trying to do. That's what you're trying to build relationships with. We are meant to be in a community. So much of corporate America and so much of this game that we play in producer land, they want us siloed because if we're siloed, we're easily controlled, so on and so forth. I think community is best, and if you can lead with the heart and you can meet people with where they're at, and you can build that downline and upline, I think you're going to have a well-suited career, and you're going to be known as a leader instead of just a producer in the industry.
The terminology downline takes me back to my multi-level marketing days. I got hooked back in my early 20s, right when I got out of pro ball, to get into the multi-level marketing thing. So shout out to anybody else that's gotten hooked on that. Most of it's absolute garbage, and I'm like super cringe and embarrassed to think about some of the shit I did back in the day. You want to talk about calling on family and friends and insurance? Try being in multi-level marketing. Boy, you'll burn some relationships.
Yep, absolutely.
Um, did you ever get hooked on it? Did anybody ever get you?
No, people thought Cutco was down or was multi-level marketing. I was like, it's not multi-level marketing at all. So, but no, never got into it.
What about pouring into others as a senior producer? I know you're in a really good spot at Collier, but you talk to a lot of producers. Do you hear from other producers? Because I feel like on my end, I hear that a lot. It's like, it's just kind of like, yeah, you just got to go find your way, you know, and like bring us back some policies and we'll show you a few things to look at. But, you know, I think it's just kind of hit or miss. There are some places that are really good, like Collier, and then there's other places there it's just It's totally sink or swim. So I mean, what's your read on the market on that?
You know, at Collier, my door's always open. The guys know that. But it's finding the right producer. The producer's got to ask questions first. Like I'm not going to mentor someone that doesn't come in my office and ask questions. You know, I'm not going to give advice to people that don't ask for it. Just plain and simple. You know, that's one rule. The other rule I live by, this is personally, I'm also not going to give parenting advice until my kids are 18 plus and they're successful, right? I'm just not going to do it. It makes no sense. And so at the end of the day, you know, for me to start preaching at people, that's different than coming to me. And so um, I am finding, especially since the Max Rev podcast launched with us with Friends with Benefits, I've got probably 15 messages that I haven't been able to respond to because I was out all last week sick of guys and gals that are reaching out and saying, "Hey, I'm new to the industry. Can I just pick your brain?" And so I think they're out there. For me, I had to go outside the walls of this office when I first started to find that. And thankfully, I found a couple of really solid, just good guys and gals that just taught me a lot about the industry and were patient with me and bringing me up. And so I would say if you're a junior producer, and I'll add on the senior producer here in a second, learn how to ask the right questions because the quality of your questions will determine the outcomes that you have. Right. So if you just come in and you're blabbing, or if you're not pointed with what you're trying to come in and achieve, you're really wasting everybody's time. And for the senior producer, I would say I would encourage you to create a framework to where you're inviting people in, right? Drop the arrogance, drop the chip on the soul, the shoulder. We're all human, like I said before. Remember when you were in that producer's shoes and provide some warmth to that conversation. You know, you're going to set the temperature of that conversation when that new producer comes in. Why? Because you're the more mature one. So if you want to act like a jerk, you know, that's going to be the temperature of the conversation. And that's what you're going to be remembered by. If you want to act like a mentor and someone that's caring and giving, you're going to be remembered by that because you're setting that temperature and that level.
Yeah, I think I think we as an industry, there's a lot of really good people out there who are willing to give and help and do. I mean, I've found it endless, but I also hear from a lot of guys and experienced it myself and from a few guys in my first couple of years where it's like it's almost like you treat like somebody comes you walk in their office and they start turning papers over. You know what I mean? And it's like they like you're almost their competition. You know what I mean? And the thing I think this is true across every industry. It's like what is it? A rising tide raises all ships. It's like if if an older and I seriously doubt there's some guy listening here to this podcast that this relates to anyways because he's probably not listening to these type of podcasts. But like if you are a little bit standoffish with that younger producer, I would just encourage you to like maybe flip that, just try it a different way for a while because the one thing that like obviously prospecting and effort, but also just energy, man. Like being that guy, I can't tell you how many guys that I would talk to when I was young and hungry and they'd be like, "Man, I just like just the energy. You bring this new influx of ideas and energy and it almost like helps them revive their career, right? And it helps them go to another level." So there's a a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. It's not just the young guy's taken away from the new guy, or excuse me, the young guy's taken away from the old guy. I mean, you can help them raise their game, and right, they get their book and they start going. And let's say they bring in some appointments. Not, I'm not talking about meetings. I'm saying appointments, or they like start opening up these doors, and then now that gives you more opportunities to write new lines of business, new industries. So, I mean, I just, especially if you're on the same team,
Well,
uh,
that too, and I would encourage the junior producers to look at the lifestyle of these senior producers. You know, if they're miserable people at home, they're on their third marriage, but they make a lot of money, it's probably not someone you want to follow after their footsteps. You
that's
know,
fair.
if their kids don't talk to them, and you know you're like, okay, you're 20 years down the road, you might not want to follow every little bit of advice they give you. And if it's the guy that's hitting Control Alt Delete every time you're walking into his office to shut his screen down, he's probably a miserable person in general. Like just don't be around that guy, and you're not going to become that guy, right? As we've talked about before, there's no secret sauce in this industry. There's no secret sauce in your office. You guys all know you guys all know your strategy plan, right? So if they're not willing to be open with you to grow not only yourself but themselves as well, that's a red flag that you probably want to avoid. You want to look for the person that's just an open-ended book that again is willing to help you, because the more they help you, they know the more that they're going to grow themselves and help everybody else.
So I want to end with one bonus question. This wasn't on your sheet, but we've had a couple that are aimed at junior producers more applicable. So I want to have one more for senior producers. And I will edit out your pause if you need to pause for a second. But I want you to think about this. So we're talking about biggest mistakes. Let's talk about the biggest mistake you see from producers you take business from. What is a common mistake that you see that you feel like shows itself more than others that helps you win accounts from them?
Humility, lack thereof. The
Really?
last
Of
40
all the things, humility, the insured is just sick of their attitude?
the last
Really?
4 deals we took over, I remember taking the CFO to lunch, and this is probably 2 months after we got the deal, and I just remember looking him in the eyes, and I was like, who do we compete with? I never really asked you that; it really didn't matter. And he told me who we were competing with, and it was a really solid producer, multi-million-dollar producer, really well known in the industry. And he said, yeah, he was just arrogant through the whole process, knew everything, belittled the people that he was working with in the meeting. It's like his own team, he would belittle in the meeting, would not let them talk, would not let them have a word in, interrupted all the time. And at the end of the day, we decided to go with y'all because you had the exact opposite approach. Now our team members weren't going to say anything silly. They knew when to talk. Don't get me wrong, but we weren't interrupting. Like we're if you're in the room in the boardroom, you're an adult, right? You know your role within that meeting. Um, Same thing to be said where we had, you know, for what it's worth, what you say in private sometimes does get out. We had another client we took over, and one of the executive team members overheard the producer in the bathroom saying some pretty meaningful things that were not nice about the team that she was a client of. And they essentially said, if that's how she felt, then we're just going to let her go, and fired her. And we got the BOR that way as well, just because this producer at hand did not respect the organization that she was insuring or the people that were in the decision making suite. So I've got a few other stories like that, but I would always say it comes down to humility. And again, that's another story as old as time. You want to be prideful. Prideful has its own mechanism of getting back at you, and that's called the fall. So
100%. Anything else you'd like to add before we put a bow on this thing?
I would just say, as a word of encouragement, keep stacking days. We've got the new year just started. Um, your year is not going to be defined by the first or second quarter of this time, but your ability to stack those days will. So if you can get 60 weeks of stacking days, and you get to that, not 60 weeks, 60 days of stacking days into the first quarter, you're going to have a heck of a Q2. And that's what I would encourage you to start focusing on, is the process and how you're going to stack those days instead of just the outcome and the revenue, because those will follow.
Awesome. Man, appreciate you as always. Great episode. And everybody listening, we will catch you on the next one.
See you later.